Good evening and welcome to the Eldritch Avenue podcast, documenting a lifetime of experiences with the ridiculous, the absurd, the unusual, the peculiar, and the sometimes unfathomable. I am your host, Joel Norman, sharing with you the many inexplicable happenings which have occurred to me over the course of my 57 years here on planet Earth. I will present my experiences of time spent on the Eldritch frontiers in 3 waves. The first wave stories will be the easiest for you to digest. These stories are non-threatening, easy to comprehend, and readily placed in reality. The second wave stories, though readily placed in reality, will be difficult to listen to, and only the empathetic mind will get through them. The third wave stories will look at these things all sane persons edit out of their conscious lives as they carefully curate the content of their reality. These are the things your mind will be desperate for you to avoid. These stories open wide that which is named the Eldritch, that being the otherworldly, that which is beyond. Welcome back to Eldritch Avenue, part 4 of the Elvin Secret Stairs. Last episode, I talked about my experiences, or lack of remembrance of my experiences, at Whitley Strieber's cabin in upstate New York. And so, continuing along this vein, which I have named the Elvin Secret Stairs, after I returned from that trip, there was a pronounced frequency of nocturnal disturbances and other kinds of disturbances. And where I'm at today is a lot different than where I was back then. And I've done a lot more research, and of course with the world now taking a long, hard, serious look at this reality, I feel more confident in sort of like talking about it as if it were real, because it is. I guess I should say I'm sort of like feeling confident that I'm not going to be totally set upon and ridiculed, or somebody wants to try and ridicule me about this topic, I'll be like, hey, why don't you go talk to the Pentagon, and so on and so forth. Because if the whistleblowers meeting with Congress are saying this shit's real, then gosh, I guess people are going to have to take it a little more seriously, and stop ridiculing people who do take it seriously. So moving along, I have come to understand a concept through my research that there is something known as the hitchhiker effect when dealing with the UAPs and the UAP, that whole phenomenon and everything related to it, UFOs, the visitors, blah, 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 blah. There's what is known as the hitchhiker effect. And so I've done a little more research into that. And I think last time I may have mentioned George Knapp. George Knapp is a well-known journalist. He has won the Edward R. Murrow Award several times. He has 24 Southwest Regional Emmys. He's won 6 actual Emmys and multiple Peabody Awards. He works at KLAS TV. He's the host of Coast to Coast. He has a bachelor's degree in communication. He has a master's degree in communication and has also been a reporter for PBS. And George Knapp has partnered with Colm Kelleher, Colm Kelleher, PhD, and I'll just sort of read you a little something about Colm. He's a biochemist with a 15-year research career in cell and molecular biology. Following his PhD in biochemistry from the University of Dublin, Trinity College in 1983, Kelleher worked at the Ontario Cancer Institute, the Terry Fox Cancer Research Institute, and the National Jewish Center for Immunology and Respiratory Medicine. For the past 8 years, he has worked as a project manager and team leader at a private research institute using forensic science methodology to unravel scientific anomalies. Now, together, George Knapp and Colm A. Kelleher have authored a book dealing with what they call, among other things, but they deal with what is known as the hitchhiker effect. And their book is not just about the hitchhiker effect, but it really does give you insight into that. And they, both of these highly accredited persons consider it real, as does Travis Taylor. And Travis Taylor, Dr. Travis Taylor, is an engineer and best-selling author who holds PhDs in optical science and engineering, aerospace systems engineering, and master's degrees in physics and astronomy. For the past 25 years, Taylor has worked on various high-tech programs for the Department of Defense and NASA. And so he is a really well-respected, scientist, and he has gone on the record in multiple interviews and online, records of his opinions about the hitchhiker effect, and he has focused his research on different regions in the United States, particularly at Skinwalker Ranch. All three of these gentlemen have experience with Skinwalker Ranch, and I'm sure many of you have probably heard that in the past, and they all talk about the hitchhiker effect. And what the hitchhiker effect is, sometimes it's associated with a region, and once you sort of come into contact with, whether it is this region that is associated with UAPs, and what other people may consider, the supernatural or whatever, you can become entangled with these things, and they can follow you home, and it can cause problems in your life. And you can go, I will put links in the comments on YouTube for this episode, and you can follow those links and go and look at their interviews and how they talk about the hitchhiker effect. And George Knapp talks about, his wife, they have had really negative experiences with the hitchhiker effect at their home after he did his work with Skinwalker Ranch. And Travis Taylor as well has talked about it, and that it's a really tricky business dealing with these things because of this hitchhiker effect. And, Travis Taylor is a serious accredited scientist, and he's just like, this is really tricky. And it's, they regularly video and film, UAPs at Skinwalker Ranch. And these are like serious scientists. Colm Kelleher talks about the hitchhiker effect as well, and they study it from a scientific perspective, and they're like, this is real, this happens, we've all experienced this. So I'm simply giving you this background so that you understand that when I use that term and the effects of the hitchhiker effect, or whatever, you'll know that there are other people out there who are using this term, and I'm simply borrowing it from them and giving you their credentials and just a little overview of their experiences, so that you know that I'm just not blowing smoke up your asses, and that I'm just not contriving a story, for my podcast. So that being said, and having a little bit of an understanding of the hitchhiker effect, you can sort of like have a little more insight into, my stories. Anybody who has known me or come into contact with me in the last 5 to 10 years has experienced the hitchhiker effect, or the effects of the hitchhiker effect. My coworkers can certainly say like, yeah, there's something going on here. I've not discussed it with them because it kind of can rattle them. So the hitchhiker effect, is probably different for every person. But for me, the people around me start to, I believe, as I've been told, they start to hear very striking messages in their mind, and the hitchhiker is sort of narrating a lot of bullshit to them. And I think it's, most people sort of classified in their mind as like, well, this is my secret connection to God, and God is telling me this is true. And that's dangerous territory. That is some fucked up shit there. And I would encourage everyone to sort of like not be run around or driven around by their subconscious or their imagination, and just be sort of like, do a little research about the hitchhiker effect. Look into Travis Taylor and his interviews about the hitchhiker effect, and Colm Kelleher, PhD, and George Knapp, and have that listen to how they describe the hitchhiker effect. And then if you're around me and you know this, you've experienced these sort of effects and whatnot, and you hear thoughts in your mind, you may think it's like you're, the super secret feminine intuitive information highway telling you, and you always trust it, and like, gosh, we're sort of moving into a new phase of human evolution, and none of the old ways are going to work anymore. And I think we're all going to figure that out. But I'm just saying, figure it out for yourself, but just know that's kind of something that's been going on for me for a number of years now. And it's been really difficult, So anyway, moving on. So after I returned from Whitley Strieber's cabin and finished that project and came back to Minneapolis, went on with life as usual, and, was doing, at the time, I was working as a decorative painter, as I mentioned, doing murals, decorative painting, faux finishing, that kind of stuff. And the market in Minneapolis for that was slowing up. And also there was a glut of painters in the Twin Cities. So work was starting to get few and far between. It was slowing up. And I didn't want to be on a ladder for the rest of my life. So I thought, I need to figure something else out. And so I was going to go home and visit my parents, because at that time I was going home usually about twice a year, sometimes 3 times a year, to visit my mom and my dad and my other members of my family, my aunt and uncle and those things. And so I was sort of in a quandary this drive home, and I mentioned it in the last podcast that it's like, if you take your time, it was a 6-hour drive for me to get to my parents' house in eastern Iowa from Minneapolis. And I always like to take the side roads, and go past, old 1800s buildings and stuff, because I just liked it better than the interstate. The interstate's so boring. So I take a more direct route through smaller towns. And I just kept thinking the whole way home, I just need to be focused. I need to get focused. I rarely make demands, of the universe or my guardian angels or whatever, however you guys might want to term those things. And I just was sort of at the time, my focus spiritually was, what I'm describing to him, and I just kept repeating this mantra in my head, this question: I need a sign. I need a sign from the universe that cannot be denied, that is just going to be in my face, so it can't be misinterpreted. And I kept saying that. I kept describing that. I want something that cannot be misinterpreted. I need a sign. And I'm that's important. And I need to help me stay focused and try and find my way, because I was just getting really tired of faux finishing. And, I really wanted to get my passion back, or get my drive back and get my focus back. And I knew I wanted to get into film work or acting and stuff. I just wasn't sure what to do at all. I was really feeling very lost and unfocused. So for that 6 hours, I just kept chanting that question, I need a sign. I'm politely asking for a sign that is undeniable. So I get home and I see my folks, and we're hanging out and blah, 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 and doing what we do. And, they live on a farm and they were raising flowers and drying them and selling the dried flowers to vendors and selling them at the farmer's market, blah, blah, blah. So I would go home and help them. And as a part-time having worked as a floral designer, I would, get out the glue gun and make beautiful wreaths for them to sell at the farmer's market and so on and so forth. And so, it was in the middle of summer and it was just boiling hot. And I, would stay in my mother's guest bedroom, which was my older brother's bedroom when we were kids. And it's on the second floor. The windows in that room face south out onto our fields. And you can see up the hill to the barn at the edge of our property. And it's just boiling hot. And my parents did not have central air in that room. I don't know if they even have central air to this day, but if my mom does. But so I'm just, it's hot. I can't sleep. I've got a fan going, but I'm just sort of like, and I'm really in a quandary in my head. I was like, I'm just like, what am I going to do? I feel like I've lost my way. I'm off the path or something. And I was just saying in my head, am I doing what I need to be doing? Am I on the right path? Am I still on the right path? Was really my question. And I need a sign. If I'm on the right path, let me know. So as per the way I was, I just insomnia, can't sleep. It's boiling hot, can't sleep. I'm laying there. And I hear in my mind, and when I say hear in my mind, I mean like, when you're thinking, let's say you're making a list for the grocery store, and you might use your inner voice, right? And you might be like, I need to get potatoes, I need to get carrots, I need to get whatever. And so you can use your inner voice, when you're thinking. It's part of how part of how I sometimes, do my processing internally. And I hear in my mind very distinctly, very energetically, very clearly, go to the window. And I was just sort of like, it was like a bell going off like a shotgun. And I was just sort of like, holy buckets. I mean, it was just like, and I just froze. I'm like, what was that? And then I hear again, like 3 seconds later, only way more intensely, go to the window now. And I'm like, okay. So I jump up, I crawl to the end of the bed, and I look out the window. And I see this very brightly lit, tangerine colored diamond shape. It's like if you see an elongated diamond shape, it's not a square, it's a long diamond shape, skinny diamond shape. If the diamond's laying on its side, lengthwise, gliding through the sky, just above the barn and trees on our property. Now, it was probably further away and up higher in the sky. It wasn't right over the barn because I didn't see any light on the barn. But it was tangerine, and I was sort of like, holy crap. Now, I will be putting a link in the comments of this post on YouTube to a link of this UFO. Years later, I found video of this thing. And I just knocked me off my chair. I was like, holy crap. So I will put that link in there and you can see it. And it's like when you see the video, like I can imagine people are like, that's not real. Because it doesn't look, I mean, it's a UFO for fuck's sake. How's it supposed to look real? People always think they know what a UFO is supposed to look like. Like, no. And it looked like a video game. It looked like something in a video game. That's what I mean. It was like LED almost. It had that weird LED glow to it or something. And it was, it was glowy, whatever. But it was like a long tangerine diamond with this like ridge down the middle. And it was just gliding along through the sky. and it was heading from west to east because I was looking out the window staring south. And it glided for a little ways, and then another one faded into view. And when I say faded into view, I mean it's like it was on a rheostat. And someone just, in the matter of 3 seconds, gradually brought the light up to full power. So it just faded into view, and it was heading from the east to the west, below this other one. Or above, it was below. And when they passed over each other, because they were traveling parallel to each other, or so it looked, the moment they passed each other, they flashed white light twice very quickly. So it was like blink, blink. And then the one that was below faded out and disappeared again, completely disappeared into the dark sky. And the other one kept going. And then eventually the other one, they were low enough that when they were traveling along the horizon, they eventually were lost to my vision behind trees. There's all these trees at the neighbors at the top of the hill on the left-hand side. And it went behind the trees. And I sat there and I was like, holy crap, holy crap, holy crap. And then I heard in my mind very precisely and clearly, you asked for a sign. This is your sign. I'm getting goosebumps again right now. I'm just like literally getting choked up. And I just was like, okay, all right, okay, that's a sign. That's a big fucking sign. That's just like, okay. And so it was like this huge, well, it was a definite effort on their part, okay, to communicate with me in a way that conformed to a request I had made. And that never happened to me before. I never had anything like that happen before, where you make a request and it's something happens. So I was, of course, bouncing off the walls, completely bouncing off the walls. And I sat up and I was just sort of like, I had this feeling like, you might as well try and sleep because nothing else is going to happen. It's like, it's not like television. You can't just switch the channel and some new show is going to be on. There's not going to be any more UFO action tonight. And so I was like, okay, all right. So I didn't look at the clock. I know it was well after midnight. It was well after midnight because I went to bed at 11 and laid there for a long time. So it was after midnight. But eventually I did fall asleep. And so because I was up so late, I slept in. And at that point in time, my usual wake-up time was about 9:15. So the next morning I get up and I come downstairs and I walk into the kitchen. And my mom and dad always have like their second coffee break at 9 a.m. And they're sitting at the table, drinking coffee. And as soon as my dad sees me, he goes, "We've been waiting all morning for you to get up." And I'm just like, oh, God, what now? What, am I supposed to go shovel hog shit or something? Like my dad viewed children as just free labor, and he said as much. You were his slave until either you died or he died. Do you know what I mean? And I was just kind of like, okay, whatever. I'll make more wreaths. What's the problem? He's like, "Did you hear that last night?" And I'm just kind of like, "What, Dad? I didn't. What are we talking about?" "You didn't hear that last night? The helicopter?" And I'm just like, "No. What? Sorry. No. I'm saying no." So my dad describes to me, and my mom, of course, was like, "I can't believe you didn't hear that." I'm just like, "What happened?" So my dad describes at like in the middle of the night, the dead of the night. So I don't remember if they said it was 3 or 3:30 or something like that, but it was after I'd gone to sleep after 2 a.m. He said that they were awakened by the sound of a massive helicopter right over the house. Now, my dad had been in the military for 3 or 4 years or something like that, I think. And, he had trained on helicopters like as an infantry. And he had, he was an MP at Fort Knox, and so he knew these helicopters, and I go to air shows or whatever, and you'd see the helicopters, and he would know what the helicopters were called and stuff like that. And so he said it just sounded like a big so-and-so Huey, blah, blah, blah. And they described that this helicopter was just so close to the house and wasn't moving. And they became alarmed. So my dad, gets up and quickly throws on, I don't know, like underwear or something, and gets a shotgun and goes outside. And, there's a helicopter that he can barely make out, barely 30 feet above our house. And that's his description. And it was all black. There were no strobe lights, and they could not see lighting inside of the helicopter. No lights whatsoever, all black. But because there's a street light right there, he could barely make out. I mean, he could see it. He could see it was a helicopter. He could see it was a big helicopter. And it was just hovering right over our house, over their house, the house I grew up in. And he said that, it was there. It wasn't there for like a super long time, less than 5 minutes, but certainly long enough for him to get rattled and get very concerned. And he didn't know what to do, as he said. He was just like, went out there with a shotgun, and he saw it was what looked like a military helicopter. So at that point in time, he decided not to shoot at it. But it was just incredibly loud. He said it was unbelievably loud. It was just incredibly big, and then eventually it lifted up and went away and was lost into the darkness of the night. And it was a moonless night, so, there wasn't any ambient light for that. There was only the light from the street light, which is on the corner of the yard there, where the road is. And there was, so they could sort of see it. There was enough light from the street light that he could make out the complete outline, and he could see, the mechanical structures of the helicopter. So he knew it was a helicopter. Now, of course, lots of people will report, people who have experience with UAPs and the whole UFO phenomena and the visitors and blah, 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 of these unmarked black helicopters. You can look it up. And so my dad describes this whole thing, and he goes, how could you not hear that? He goes, it was rattling the windows in the house. It was shaking the house. And I was just sort of like, I don't know what to tell you, Dad. I didn't hear a thing. I didn't wake up last night. And again, it was one of those nights where I didn't get up and go to the bathroom. I do not remember getting up and going to the bathroom. And he was like, he got visibly, well, my dad was always pissed off, but he was very pissed off that I didn't hear anything. And he thought I was lying. I think he thought I was lying, I guess I should say. Or I don't know what he was thinking. Of course, I don't know what he was thinking. But I was just sort of like, I didn't hear anything. I don't remember anything. I would have remembered that. And so, again, I hear in my mind, you wanted a sign. And I'm just kind of like, okay. Wow, okay. This is a rattle your teeth kind of thing. So not only did I see the 2 tangerine diamonds after my little conversation in my head with whatever to go to the window, then there was this the next morning following up. And I was like, okay. And so that was kind of like, that was intense. That was really intense. And so, of course, I made a mental note. And like I said, I was, at that point in time, I was, coming home to visit my parents, 2 or 3 times a year. So, I was actually going home the next day and driving back to Minneapolis. And so, which was a good thing. And because, I would usually go home for a week or whatever. And so I went home the next day and I drove back to Minneapolis. And then I was back home visiting my mom and dad like 6 to 8 months later. It wasn't that long. It was probably closer to 8 months, I would say.
And so we're sitting, I'm back home visiting 8 months later, we're sitting at the kitchen table. And so, as is my practice, I will say to people, hey, do you remember when we saw that, UFO? Or do you remember when this happened? Do you remember when there was electricity running in the water? Do you remember seeing the pixies? Blah, blah, blah. And so I asked them, like, so you remember the last time I was home? And they were like, yeah, that was, what was it? Oh, that was in August. So that was when we were, doing the farmer's market and blah, 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 and picking zinnias and blah, yeah, and I remember that. Okay. And we went down to the farmer's market on the levee in Davenport and sold your fresh cuts. Yep, I remember that. And then we went and, had lunch at blah, blah, blah. So like, yep, remember that. I'm like, okay, so do you remember the morning I got up, the Sunday morning I got up, and you were saying that there had been a helicopter over the house in the middle of the night? Do you remember that big black helicopter? And my parents stared at me like, and my dad like, what the hell are you talking about? And I just stared at him. And I'm just like, you don't remember telling me about a black helicopter over the house in the middle of the night the last time I was home? My dad was like, no, I don't remember that. And I was just like, oh my God. So I just let it go. I have learned not to even try and drum up any more memories for people. If their memory's wiped, their memory's wiped. If they're not able to recall the memory, they couldn't even recall the memory of telling me about it. Because you guys are really upset. Nope, not having it, not real, didn't happen. Okay. So that leaves me in a seriously fucked up place. Because, once again, here's people who are like, I don't remember this, that didn't happen, what? Even my mom, she gets up and starts getting busy. So I'm like, okay, well, something's working on her. So, whatever, that didn't happen. And they, of course, I've never brought it up again with them. And my dad passed away like 10 years ago. So obviously I wouldn't be talking to him about it. And I'm not going to bother my mom because, she's just getting over her second bout with cancer. So, she's 81. I'm not going to bug her with stuff like this because it'll just be upsetting for her. But I just feel like the whole thing is very isolating, obviously, And so it's one of those things where I have to learn to live with the isolation and live with those nights when there's just a black screen over everything. No dreams, no getting up to go to the bathroom, no remembering anything. It's just you go to bed, you go to sleep, and you wake up the next morning and you didn't dream anything and you don't go to the bathroom in the middle of the night. So there's nothing. So it's just like if I were to create like a scroll of my entire life that's illustrated, there's just going to be a bunch of black squares because I don't know. And I just have to like deal with it. So anyways, back to the hitchhiker effect. After, visiting Whitley Strieber's cabin, the hitchhiker effect became way more pronounced. And the UAP thing is not like something you put on the calendar. Like, okay, well, I'm going to schedule my UAP experiences at 3:33 in the morning this Saturday. And equally confusing for some people is that the UAP thing is not just a separate item. It seems to connect itself to a lot of other stuff. And people who have UAP experiences, and especially the hitchhiker effect, there's the whole connection to electricity and the weirdness with electricity. So I've got that happening. So after Whitley Strieber's cabin and after this whole big thing with my parents, the nocturnal events started getting more pronounced, the nocturnal activity. And by that, I mean and these are things that other people report too. So you can read Whitley Strieber's, books, and other people, there's this thing that happens Like one night when I lived over on Garfield, like it's the middle of the night, I'm asleep, and then suddenly like something smacks the bed frame really, really hard. Like someone took a hammer or a sledgehammer or a board and smacked the bed frame. And you're jolted awake and you're kind of like, what the hell was that? And you're kind of like, you're dead asleep, and then someone does that or something does that. And I'm kind of like, okay. And then I look at the clock. I've got one of those old school, LED clocks that's red, and it says 3:33 in the AM. And I'm like, okay. And that's sort of a pattern. Something jolts you awake, and you're suddenly, your instinct uses adrenaline to like make you suddenly terrified as a way of bringing all of your systems online very quickly and making you very instantly alert and awake. So you get this jolt of, adrenaline, and then you're like awake and you're afraid and something, what's going on? Am I in danger, or was there something wrong? And quite often my instinct is like, there's somebody in the house. There's somebody in the house that shouldn't be here. And I get up and I run around through the house and everything and looking and looking and looking. And some of the times when that happens, I jolted awake, something smacks the bed, and I look at the clock and it says 3:33. Now, I'm sure there's many people who have this sort of connection to life with UAPs and nocturnal disturbances where it happens at 3:33 in the morning. And I don't know if that's their friggin' calling card. I know there's people who will have lots to say about that, but I'm going to try and keep this to just saying what has happened when I was fully awake. And I never give credence or importance to things that don't happen when I'm not fully awake. It's always either I'm awake or I'm dreaming or I'm asleep. And if I'm not awake, then that's just imagination. And that gets written down in my dream journal, blah, blah, blah. But I have worked really hard to, since I started seeing the little balls of light in college, and noticing them in my peripheral vision, I've studied my peripheral vision. I will meditate and sit with my eyes open. Everyone thinks you meditate with your eyes closed. Not always. And after meditating with my eyes open, you start to become aware of how to sort of better utilize your ability to be aware of your peripheral vision zones. And so much so to the point that I can tell where my peripheral vision drops off and where I can no longer see anything, behind me, to the side, back past my shoulders. Just past my shoulders is where that sort of blur zone happens, and then I can't see anything. Because if you ever just sit and focus on a lamp or a spot on the wall or whatever, and you can see 90 degrees to your right, you can see whatever, the window. You can see the curtains on the window, but for me right now, I can't see past that. So I've studied my peripheral vision. Even though my eyes are focused on an object directly in front of me, there's all that peripheral vision stuff and data coming in and being input into my visual experience. So I've studied my peripheral vision a lot. Because these, little balls of light, are more easily seen, in the peripheral vision. Now, I did have one experience with my visiting my friend Jill's house, and one night I'm sitting in her living room, and she had stood up at the sofa and was picking up her glass and was going to go freshen her cocktail or something or whatever, or go get water, whatever. I don't know what she was drinking. I wasn't drinking because I don't really drink alcohol. And all of a sudden I saw a pixie, zip through the air in the middle of the room. And Jill, her head whipped up and looked right at it. So I knew she had seen it. So I just sort of I'm going to make a moment. I'm going to record this. And I'm like, okay, Jill, did you just see a little ball of light zip through the center of the room right about 6 feet off the floor? And she, it was in the moment, and she thankfully didn't deny it. And Jill was like, oh, the pixies are out tonight. But she couldn't bring herself saying yes, I saw a little ball of light. She just couldn't cross that line. But she acknowledged it by saying, oh, yep, the pixies are out tonight. And I'm kind of like, okay, at least there's a little bit of confirmation there. But anyway, so moving along. So again, I mentioned there's the smacking the bed frame at 3:33 in the morning. We touched base about the black helicopter that my parents couldn't remember 6 months later, and the hitchhiker effect. Now, I will say that my coworkers now will all probably be able to acknowledge that there's something else going on with Joel. Like the supernatural aspects of human consciousness, like I feel like intuition, right? The imagination. Science doesn't know how the mind works. Science doesn't, I mean, in the respect that they don't know how the brain-body combination generates consciousness. They don't know, hardly at all. They can they know the plasticity of the brain, but they don't know. And if anyone has experienced intuition, in different ways where you may get forewarning of stuff. Some people may get pseudo precognitive dreams. I know that women certainly, have the super secret feminine intuitive information highway, and they get messages and stuff like that. Anybody who is in tune with the universe and meditate and eats right will have probably a more pronounced, intuition. I'm not saying precognition. I'm just saying intuition, and you might get, information from whatever. And I've experimented with that. I have, and I'm saving that for a later episode where I experiment with transmitting through the ethers to see whose network picks up on it, and seeing what gets reported back to me or what happens after that. So that's for another episode later on. But we're dealing with the, Elvin secret stairs right now. So after the tangerine diamond thing and the black helicopter night at my parents', I was like, okay, this is serious. The universe has definitely taken an interest in me. And so I think they probably wanted me to focus on that at the time, but I was still really apprehensive about that. And my work, is finally swinging around back to that. There's been a lot of difficult experiences. And if I say it's difficult, then it's got to be intense, if not severe, because I've been through some serious shit my day, stuff that you'll find out about later in the podcast. And you can be like, oh, he's making that up because he wants people to subscribe. I don't really give a flying fuck if people believe me. I'm saying this because I need the universe to know I'm moving forward with it. And I also am doing it for my own peace of mind, for my own mental health. That is why I'm doing it. I'm not doing it for anybody else. I'm not doing it because I want to be, go viral and be famous. And no. Thank you. So, the next couple of items, I guess, for the Elvin secret stairs are gonna be I'll save for my next podcast, I think. But again, this is like I'm just reporting stuff that I experienced while I was, completely awake and fully conscious. And I have practiced. I studied deep transcendental meditation in college and have practiced it, over the years, practiced yoga. I've always, I bike every day, a minimum of 7 miles, sometimes 15 miles a day. I eat very healthy, lots of vegetables, tons of water, no alcohol, no tobacco, no drugs. And I don't take any, I don't do drugs and I don't drink alcohol. So just so you know, that's where I'm at and where I've been for like a number of years. So anyways, the next episode is going to be about one of my experiences in Iowa, only up at my brother's house one evening, and it was very brief, but it was really intense. And something happened there that to this day is just like, that's impressive. And you read it, you hear about Whitley Strieber and his books, and lots of other books. I had my friend Terry send me a book, years ago, and dealing with some things and about this topic. It was a different author about people getting, switched off when people are, in a space with someone who is dealing with UAPs and the visitors, and I'm not going to say abduction because that sounds really weird. That sounds scary and messed up. So I'm just going to say, should you ever travel with them? Because I got a lot of black screens happening in my mind about this stuff, and I probably should try and find somebody to help me get to some of that. But there's other things to be talked about too, more just as equally important. So we'll save for the next episode of the Elvin Secret Stairs is going to be talking about some stuff that happened at my brother's house one evening. And I'm sure they have no knowledge of it, and I never discussed it with them. But that's sort of an interesting story. And then we'll talk more in the next podcast about the other related effects of the little balls of light and the hitchhiker effect again, which can be disturbing for people. And the hitchhiker effect, I don't know a lot about it except my own experiences, and I can only guess at things. And the people that I've talked to describe, what's going on for them with the hitchhiker effect. And you can go online again and look up George Knapp and I'm going to put the links in the comments where George Knapp and Colm Kelleher talk about the hitchhiker effect and how it's very difficult for the people around the people who have had the experiences with UAPs. And that they're just like, it's because George talks about his wife's reaction to the hitchhiker effect, and she's really disturbing. It's very upsetting, and that they don't want to talk about it too much because they feel like it's just going to increase the frequency of the happenings from the hitchhiker effect. So it's a wild world out there, and again, I feel like I'm telling you about this because I think I want people to sort of be more prepared, because I think in the next 10 years, whether we like it or not, we're all gonna be face to face with new realities, and it's why I've developed my Universe Beyond Time meditation video series, because it's very effective in helping people deal with anxiety and depression, because my experience has been extreme and I had to figure out a way to get myself to a better place, because there aren't therapists who will take this seriously. There aren't people out there are professionals who can help you. You can only talk to other people who have had these experiences. And especially when you're dealing with the hitchhiker effect, that just isolates you further. So, but again, look up Colm A. Kelleher, PhD, Travis Taylor, who is, is a PhD as well. And George Knapp. All three of these gentlemen are very highly accredited, well-educated, well-known people. Look them up. Again, I'll put links in the description, and you can listen to their depositions and then correlate if you want to. But I'm going to go ahead and cut out today. And next week, we're going to pick up back in my brother's living room in Iowa for a really interesting event there, and a few other items, of course, that are connected. So once again, thank you for tuning in. Take care. Be safe.